to Mount Holly, New Jersey, and the long-abandoned Burlington County Prison, where a life sentence means doing time in the afterlife. Because this imposing gray stone building is one of the most ghost-infested lockups in the United States.
I just always felt very creeped out down there. I'd run, absolutely. I ran through the halls.
It scared me the most just because it was so close and it was so real. You know, he looked so much like a real person.
Designed by Robert Mills, the same architect who built the Washington Monument, Burlington County Prison opened in 1811 and is now a museum. By the time of its closing in 1965, it was the oldest continually used prison in the USA. And it has boasted some of America's baddest.
Most infamous person to be incarcerated here was Albert DeSalvo, who's better known as the Boston Strangler. He was in here in 1955 for carnal abuse.
9 years after the Boston Strangler was held here, he confessed to the murder of 13 women in the 1960s. Perhaps his stint at Burlington helped trigger his later behavior. It certainly was no holiday. The prison ultimately shut down because of severe overcrowding.
When the jail was built, each cell was meant to have one person. That was their main goal. By the time it closed, they would have had 4, sometimes 5, depending on what their crimes were.
But a few unfortunate inmates got a room to themselves.
This is the death row cell. This is where the inmates that were awaiting execution would have been held. If you had to be in there, it would be basically living in hell. And there's hardly any air circulation. You get minimal light. You have no human contact with anyone, and you were chained to the floor, so you couldn't really, move around all that much.
But it seems one death row inmate wants to spend eternity here.
Joel Clow is in here awaiting his execution in July of 1833. He had murdered his girlfriend. He stabbed her in the chest because she turned down his marriage proposal.
Joel Clow was hanged outside the prison and then buried in an unmarked grave in the prison yard. But some say Joel won't stay put underground.
People claim that he haunts this cell because immediately following his execution, guards and inmates started hearing noises coming from the cell. The chain rattling on the floor. They were seeing cigarettes float through the air.
Sounds like a perfect case for paranormal investigators. And they come here by the scores.
Motion sensors that we were placing inside the death row cell kept being tripped by nothing. And we were able to rule out every possible explanation, yet it was occurring again. The cell right next to it had an old stretcher that was sitting up against the far wall. Next thing I know, someone says, "Hey, what happened to that stretcher?" We looked in there, it was actually on the opposite wall now. But there's no way it could have been moved without us hearing it. So it moved by some other means. And that was pretty impressive.
Yikes. But if you want a taste of true horror in America's most haunted jailhouse, follow us down to the basement.
Well, the icky hallway, as I call it, is in the basement, and it is the site where the double homicide took place. I've always just gotten a really creepy feeling in there, feeling of being watched.
In 1920, Warden Harry King was murdered by an inmate named Harry Assay, who was in for drunken disorderly. He was being held in this cell here, and when he requested medicine, Warden King brought it down to him. When he opened the door, he had his skull cracked open by an iron bar. He died instantly. The inmate then ran down the hallway and swung at another inmate who was in the hall. He ended up killing him.
The escapee was finally caught and sent to an insane asylum for the remainder of his days. But now he's back in the very same halls he once tried to escape from.
The experience I've had here that stands out the most, that's happened to me numerous times here, was seeing more of a silhouette of a man, but definitely a big man, usually fills up the doorway, very husky. He's always seen walking up and down the steps from the top floor to the bottom floor. He definitely can surprise you at times because you'll turn around not expecting him to be there, and to see a giant guy standing right behind you, definitely get your heart racing a little bit.
Oh yeah, pay a visit to Burlington County Prison and you're sure to be scared straight.